Hi again, folks. The last paper we will write for this course is a literary analysis, which is also called literary criticism. Writing paper 4 will give us an opportunity to practice all of the skills we have learned this semester. Like paper 3, we will use sources to support the points we make in our paper. One of the sources will be the short story, A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner, which we will study while working on the paper. I also will supply the other sources that you need to use for this paper. The reason I'm supplying the sources is that, unlike many other topics, literary analysis articles by reputable sources are not published in mainstream magazines and newspapers. Literary analysis, which in the field of literature is called literary criticism, is really only available in books and academic journals. While books including a discussion of A Rose for Emily are available through the CSN library, the discussion of that short story is often included in collections of discussions of other works as well. Locating 2 or 3 anthologies that include discussions of A Rose for Emily that would contribute to a specific thesis would take a considerable amount of time, and I wanted to make sure we had a couple of weeks at the end of the semester to devote to portfolio revision. Now, in addition to books, there are articles that are literary criticism, but they are generally found in scholarly academic journals. They're written by PhDs for PhDs and use highly elevated language. Undergraduate students, especially those new to the field of literary criticism, find them extremely difficult to read and understand. Now, while the sources I supply for you are lengthy, complex, and may be difficult to study, you should be able to understand them by simply working with the standard dictionary. It will take time to complete the initial read-through you must complete before posting to the discussion board this week, and it will take even more time to study them closely enough to use them in your paper. But at least it's possible for college freshmen to understand these articles with some work. We are writing this paper because you will be asked to write analytical or critical pieces in disciplines that deal with the arts. And if you plan to seek a bachelor's degree in Nevada, you will definitely need to write a literary analysis in a required literature course. In some cases, professors might simply ask you for your views on a piece, but other professors will expect you to incorporate information from sources. While working on paper 4, we'll learn the skills that we will need to use to write papers for literature courses. However, I should warn you about the types of sources that most professors find acceptable for research-driven literature papers. Again, it is best to work with sources from college libraries or with books. There are very few acceptable sources available on the web outside of the college library site, and if you plan to use sources from the web in papers for literature classes, it's important to clear the sources with the prof first. Sites such as Shmoop are not generally accepted as sources. Those websites are meant as study guides. While many of the ideas in such sites are taken from literary sources, the sources aren't cited in any way. Those sites essentially do the research that students are expected to do for themselves. Now, that might have been fine in high school, but it isn't in college literature courses. Yes, you can use those sites to help you understand literary works and to provide ideas for papers, but you should never use them as sources for literature papers or cite them in papers for lit courses. Most college professors view using those sites as sources as taking the easy way out and avoiding doing the work that's expected for the course. You never want to do anything in any course that in any ways implies that you're trying to avoid work. Now, you may not see the value of the course, and it might not be very important to you, but the professor does see value in the work assigned, and avoiding that work indicates that you're really not interested in learning. Professors don't view college as job training, and most of us take a dim view of students who attempt to avoid learning. I also want to warn you about the use of the word criticism in the academic arts. The word analysis is actually more appropriate for the types of papers you will write. But academicians in disciplines connected to the arts use the word criticism to mean the same thing. Academic criticism in the arts is nothing like articles in mainstream media written by journalists such as movie critics, music critics, art critics, and so forth. Make sure to study the handout on writing literary analysis/criticism carefully to learn what those differences are and how to write critical analyses for courses in the arts. Let's take a look at some of the important aspects of Paper 4 that will help us prepare to write literary analysis, which, again, is usually called literary criticism. Paper 4 is designed largely to allow us to practice incorporating what we have already learned in this course. We will continue to develop our papers with concrete details from the short story and from sources. We will conduct analysis in working with both the story and the sources, and will again incorporate material from those sources in a meaningful way that supports our points, which is synthesis. We will, of course, cite our sources using MLA documentation, and will maintain objectivity by avoiding expressing our feelings or opinions, and by using high style to write a formal academic paper. One new research method we will learn and begin working with is conducting close reading. While literature papers in high school may have allowed you to focus on the very basics of plot, character, settings, and themes, college literary papers require a more in-depth understanding of the pieces we write about. We can't simply read a work once and expect to be able to write an acceptable college paper on it. Instead, we must use close reading, which is reading a work to analyze its components carefully and in depth, usually to discover what the piece is saying on a deeper level. A Rose for Emily is a good story to work with to learn close reading. It's a very, very short story that is easy to read on just a surface level. But there is a great deal more going on in this story than we can see on a quick read. In a second semester composition course, I have used this story for 10-page research papers. And because the story deals with so many societal and cultural topics, I seldom receive papers that dealt with the same topics, used the same sources, or developed ideas in a similar way. So, since the story is short, but is packed with so many great topics, it's a good story to work with to learn to write literary analysis. For our paper, I have provided sources that deal with a number of issues that are brought up in the story, but they all deal in some way with how people of the town of Jefferson contribute to the crime that is committed, or help cover it up. In other words, they deal with a phrase from an old song. It isn't very pretty what a town without pity can do. Although other issues that are raised by the story are mentioned in some of our sources, there isn't enough information in these sources to develop them very well, so you would need to find other acceptable sources to use. I strongly advise against it, since you're expected to use only academic sources located through the CSN library for this paper. As I said, those sources can be very difficult to read. But if you want to write a paper on a different issue raised in the supplied articles, you must find good academic sources from the library to use, and you must email me links to the sources so I can determine if they are acceptable. Don't use any sources without clearing them with me first, and don't use any sources other than those from the CSN library. If you use the sources I provide, which would be the easiest thing to do anyway, you'll have no problems. So that's what I recommend you do. As I said, Paper 4 is designed largely to provide us with more practice in working with the skills we've already learned in this course. There really aren't any new writing skills to learn. However, that doesn't mean that the writing skills are any less important than they have been in other papers. We will use all the skills we have learned so far. We will use prewriting to help us plan, draft, and revise our paper. We will submit a scratch outline that, like the outline for paper 3, will include information on which sources we plan to use to develop the points we plan to make. We will write a good thesis statement and use good MLA documentation and high style to write a formal academic paper. It's important to remember that you're taking this course to learn to write for other college courses. The materials taught in this course are not those that can be learned long enough to take one test or complete one assignment and then forgotten. You will be expected to use the skills taught in this course in every course that requires writing, even if you stay in school long enough to earn a PhD, and few courses will review or teach any of this material. In fact, you're required to take this course because those skills are needed but not taught in other courses. Paper 4 gives us the opportunity to practice these skills and to learn to use them even if they're not being taught in connection with the specific assignment. Well, that wraps up our introduction to our last paper, and I hope this video helps you understand what is important in this unit and why. Of course, if you have any questions about this video or about anything in the course, all you need to do is email me through Canvas. By now, you should know that I'm here to help you, and those of you who have let me help you know that I sincerely want to and will help as much as I can. Thank you so much for studying this video. I hope it helps you understand what you need to do for the Paper 4 assignment.